Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the dusty sandals of women whose lives balance precariously between divine duty and earthly survival, where temple service meant something far more complex than you might imagine. You're walking up the massive stone steps of a Babylonian ziggurat, the air thick with incense and the weight of 4,000-year-old expectations. The sun beats down mercilessly as you adjust your linen robes, knowing that what awaits you inside these sacred walls will challenge every modern assumption about ancient religious practice. You probably won't survive hearing what these women actually had to endure in the name of serving their gods, and you definitely won't look at museum exhibits the same way again. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I love seeing how this community spans the globe, from insomniacs in Tokyo to night shift workers in Detroit. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in ancient Babylon around 1800 BC, where the massive ziggurat of Marduk dominates the skyline like an ancient skyscraper made of mud, brick, and ambition. The Code of Hammurabi has just been carved into stone, but what it doesn't explicitly mention are the women you're about to meet, the sacred prostitutes who served in temples throughout Mesopotamia. You climb those worn stone steps, each one polished smooth by countless feet over centuries, and enter a world where sexuality wasn't shameful but sacred, where your body became a vessel for divine communication. The temple corridors echo with whispered prayers and the soft rustle of ceremonial garments. You pass carved reliefs depicting the goddess Ishtar, her 8-pointed star gleaming with inlaid gold, her fierce eyes seeming to follow your movement. As a temple prostitute, or Kadishtu as you'd be called, you're not simply selling your body for coin. You're performing a religious ritual that the Babylonians believed connected mortals directly with the divine realm. Think of it as the world's first customer service job, except your customers were seeking spiritual enlightenment, and your manager was a deity who occasionally demanded human sacrifice. Your daily routine begins before dawn with ritual purification in the temple's sacred pools. The water is cold against your skin, scented with myrrh and frankincense, as you wash away the previous day's encounters. You're required to maintain ritual purity, which ironically involves activities that later civilizations would consider anything but pure. The temple hierarchy is strict. Experienced sacred prostitutes oversee newcomers, teaching them the proper prayers, the correct positioning for various rituals, and how to interpret the sometimes cryptic requests of priests and wealthy patrons seeking divine favor. The economics of your situation are brutally practical. While the temple provides food, shelter, and protection, you're essentially owned by the religious institution. The silver and barley offerings left by visitors don't go into your personal coffers. They support the entire temple complex, from the high priests to the maintenance staff who scrub blood stains from the altar stones. You might receive small personal gifts, perhaps a bronze mirror or a strand of carnelian beads, but financial independence remains as elusive as the gods you serve. Historians still argue whether these sacred prostitutes were voluntary participants or essentially religious slaves, with evidence supporting both interpretations depending on the specific temple and time period. Some cuneiform tablets suggest certain women chose this life for the relative security it provided, while others indicate that debt or family obligation forced many into temple service. What's clear is that you possessed a certain social status that ordinary prostitutes lacked. You could own property, conduct business, and even adopt children, privileges denied to many women in Babylonian society. Your most challenging days involve the great festivals when thousands of pilgrims flood the temple complex. During the sacred marriage ceremony honoring Ishtar and Tammuz, you might be selected to represent the goddess herself, participating in ritual unions that the entire community believes will ensure fertile harvests and military victories. The pressure is intense. If crops fail or enemies attack, guess who might get blamed for insufficient divine enthusiasm during the ceremonies? The psychological toll of your position weighs heavily as you navigate between genuine spiritual devotion and the more mundane realities of human desire. Some visitors arrive with sincere religious intent, seeking blessing for a new marriage or healing for a sick child. Others clearly view the temple as an exotic brothel with better decor and fancier incense. You learn to read people quickly, adjusting your demeanor from mystical priestess to practical counselor depending on what each situation requires. Your living quarters within the temple complex are modest but comfortable. A small room with a sleeping mat, a wooden chest for personal belongings, and a tiny altar where you can make private offerings to whichever deity you feel might actually be listening. The walls are decorated with protective amulets and small clay figurines, creating a space that feels more like a college dorm room than the luxurious chambers modern imagination might conjure. As months turn to years, you watch younger women arrive at the temple, their eyes holding the same mixture of fear and determination you once felt. You become a mentor, teaching them not just the ritual requirements but the survival skills, how to handle difficult clients, which priests can be trusted, and when to claim illness to avoid particularly unpleasant assignments. This informal sisterhood becomes your primary source of emotional support in a world where your value is constantly measured by your ability to channel divine favor through very earthly means. The irony of your situation isn't lost on you. In serving the goddess of love and fertility, you've likely sacrificed any chance at conventional love or motherhood of your own. The temple is your world, its walls both protection and prison, its rituals both sacred duty and daily routine that grinds away at whatever dreams you might have harbored before climbing those ziggurat steps for the first time. The Nile's muddy waters lap against the reed boats as you transition from Mesopotamian temple service to the sun-baked luxury of ancient Egypt, where being a courtesan means mastering the art of looking effortlessly beautiful while using some truly questionable beauty products. You're now gliding down the river in a painted barge, your kohl-rimmed eyes scanning the approaching docks of Memphis, where pharaonic courtesans have elevated the profession to an art form that would make modern influencers weep with envy. The year is roughly 1350 BC, and you're about to discover that Egyptian beauty standards involved ingredients that would horrify a modern cosmetics chemist. Your new life revolves around the palace complexes and wealthy merchant quarters, where entertaining Egypt's elite requires encyclopedic knowledge of fashion, politics, and stomach-churning beauty treatments. The famous black coal lining your eyes contains lead sulfide, which gives you that stunning, dramatic look while slowly poisoning you with every application. But hey, at least you'll look fabulous during your gradual neurological decline. You apply it religiously each morning using ivory applicators carved with protective hieroglyphs, because apparently even makeup tools needed divine intervention in ancient Egypt. The most notorious beauty secret in your arsenal involves crocodile dung, which wealthy Egyptian women swear by as both a contraceptive suppository and facial treatment. You mix the dried, powdered excrement with honey and various herbs, creating what ancient texts describe as a complexion-perfecting mask. The smell is indescribable, but your clients insist it works miracles for maintaining youthful skin. Modern dermatologists would probably faint, but you've learned that questioning Egyptian beauty wisdom is a quick way to lose wealthy patronage. Plus, crocodile dung is apparently mildly acidic, so maybe there's some primitive chemical exfoliation happening, though you try not to think too hard about the bacterial implications. Your daily routine begins with elaborate bathing rituals using natron salt, the same mineral used for mummification. The irony isn't lost on you that you're essentially preserving yourself like a pharaoh while very much alive. You scrub with pumice stones, oil your skin with expensive unguents imported from Nubia, and arrange your elaborate wigs using beeswax and tree resin. The wigs are architectural marvels, towering constructions of human hair, plant fibers, and decorative elements that require an engineering degree to properly balance on your head. Egyptian courtesans occupy a unique social niche that's simultaneously respected and precarious. Unlike your Babylonian sisters who serve specific religious functions, you're more like a combination entertainment director, political advisor, and luxury accessory for Egypt's ruling class. You attend banquets where you're expected to dance, sing, play musical instruments, engage in witty conversation about pyramid construction projects, and look stunning while doing it all. Think of it as being a one-woman variety show, except your audience can literally have you thrown to the crocodiles if you bore them. The political dimensions of your work prove exhaustingly complex. Egypt's court intrigue makes modern reality television look straightforward by comparison. You must navigate relationships with multiple wives of high officials, their various children competing for inheritance, foreign ambassadors seeking trade advantages, and priests wielding enormous behind-the-scenes power. One careless comment about the wrong person's family lineage or religious beliefs can end your career faster than you can say, "Divine Pharaoh." You develop an almost supernatural ability to change subjects smoothly when conversations drift toward dangerous territory. Your living arrangements reflect your ambiguous status, too important for common quarters but not quite respectable enough for the main palace compound. You occupy beautifully decorated rooms in buildings adjacent to major estates, spaces filled with imported furniture, painted murals depicting gods and goddesses, and collections of cosmetic containers that would stock a modern department store. Your bedroom walls are covered with scenes from the Book of the Dead, which seems morbid until you realize that Egyptians considered death preparation a normal part of interior decorating. Historians still argue whether Egyptian courtesans wielded genuine political influence, or merely served as glamorous ornaments at state functions. Some papyrus documents suggest certain women advised pharaohs on matters ranging from military campaigns to temple construction, while others indicate their roles remained strictly ceremonial. What's documented is that several courtesans accumulated enough wealth to commission their own tomb decorations, complete with detailed afterlife provisions, suggesting they expected their careers to provide for eternity. The most challenging aspect of your position involves managing relationships with multiple powerful men simultaneously without triggering jealousy that could destroy you. Egyptian nobles are notorious for their passionate temperaments and casual attitude toward violence. You perfect the art of making each patron feel special while maintaining enough emotional distance to survive the inevitable political upheavals that regularly sweep through court circles. It's like being a diplomat, therapist, and entertainer rolled into one precarious career. Your wardrobe requirements alone would bankrupt most modern professionals. Linen garments must be absolutely spotless, no easy task in a dusty desert climate. Your jewelry collection includes gold amulets, precious stone necklaces, and elaborate headdresses that serve both decorative and protective functions. Every piece tells a story about your connections, wealth, and religious devotions, creating a visual narrative that other courtesans can read like a resume written in precious metals. As the sun sets over the pyramids and you prepare for another evening of entertaining Egypt's elite, you wonder how long you can maintain this exhausting performance. The crocodile dung face mask is hardening uncomfortably, your lead-based coal is probably slowly killing you, and tomorrow brings another round of navigating deadly court politics while looking effortlessly gorgeous. But at least you're living better than most people in the ancient world, assuming you can avoid political scandals, religious controversies, and that persistent cough that might be related to all those exotic beauty treatments. The Mediterranean breeze carries the scent of olive oil and philosophical debate as you leave behind Egyptian luxury for the intellectually charged atmosphere of classical Athens, where being a Hetaira means your brain matters as much as your beauty. A revolutionary concept that would have seemed absurd in those Babylonian temples or Egyptian palaces. You're reclining on a comfortable couch in a symposium around 450 BC, surrounded by the greatest minds of the ancient world, holding your own in discussions about mathematics, politics, and whether Socrates is as wise as he claims or just really good at asking annoying questions. Your transformation from entertainer to intellectual equals a complete career reinvention. Greek Hetaira represent the ancient world's closest approximation to independent professional women, though the independence comes with significant asterisks. You've received an education that most Athenian wives could only dream of. You can read and write fluently, compose poetry, play multiple musical instruments, and engage in sophisticated debates about everything from military strategy to metaphysical philosophy. Think of yourself as a combination university professor, therapist, and social coordinator, except your classroom is a wine-soaked dinner party and your students are drunk politicians making decisions that affect the entire Mediterranean world. The economic model of your profession represents a dramatic improvement from your predecessors. Rather than being owned by temples or dependent on palace whims, you operate as an independent contractor managing your own client relationships and financial arrangements. You rent elegant quarters in Athens' most fashionable districts, decorated with beautiful pottery, imported textiles, and small sculptures that demonstrate your cultural sophistication. Your income comes from ongoing relationships with wealthy men who value your conversation as much as your companionship. Though let's be honest, they're not paying those premium rates purely for intellectual stimulation. Your daily schedule balances rigorous self-education with social obligations that would exhaust a modern networking professional. Mornings involve studying with private tutors who teach you the latest philosophical theories, mathematical concepts, and political developments. You practice musical instruments, work on your poetry, and stay current with theatrical productions so you can discuss them intelligently at evening gatherings. Afternoons might include shopping for exotic perfumes and fabrics that enhance your sophisticated image, or visiting other hetairai to share information about clients, political developments, and professional strategies. The symposium scene showcases your unique social position. You're the only woman present at these intellectual gatherings, reclining alongside Athens' most powerful men as they debate the nature of justice, beauty, and proper governance. You contribute meaningfully to conversations about military campaigns, artistic techniques, and philosophical paradoxes, earning respect through wit and wisdom rather than just physical appeal. Of course, the evening typically concludes with more private entertainments, but at least you've had stimulating conversation beforehand. Unlike those poor Egyptian courtesans who had to look interested while pharaohs discussed pyramid engineering specifications. Your most famous colleague, Aspasia, demonstrates both the possibilities and limitations of your profession. As Pericles' longtime companion, she wields enormous informal political influence, hosting gatherings where Athens' foreign policy gets shaped over wine and philosophical debate. Some historians credit her with inspiring Pericles' most important speeches, while others suggest she basically functioned as an ancient speechwriter with benefits. Either way, she proves that hetairai can achieve genuine political significance, though always from behind the scenes, since Greek women officially have about as much political power as the furniture. Historians still argue whether the hetairai system represented genuine female empowerment, or simply a more sophisticated form of exploitation dressed up with intellectual pretensions. The evidence suggests both interpretations contain truth. You enjoy freedoms unavailable to respectable Athenian wives, but you're still dependent on male patronage and social acceptance of your unconventional lifestyle. You can own property, conduct business, and move freely through the city, privileges that married women lack, but your security remains tied to maintaining relationships with powerful men who could abandon you on a whim. The intellectual demands of your profession require constant learning and adaptation. Greek culture evolves rapidly during the classical period, with new philosophical schools, artistic movements, and political theories emerging regularly. You must stay current with Sophocles' latest tragedy, understand the implications of democratic reforms, and form opinions about military alliances that affect trade routes. It's like being a combination news analyst, cultural critic, and academic researcher, except your job security depends on making it all seem effortlessly charming over dinner. Your relationships with other women in Athens prove complicated and sometimes lonely. Respectable wives view you with mixture of envy and disdain, envious of your freedom and education, disdainful of your sexual independence. You form close friendships with other hetairai who understand the unique pressures of your lifestyle, but competition for wealthy patrons can strain even these relationships. You navigate a social world where you're simultaneously admired and marginalized, celebrated and condemned, often by the same people depending on the social context. The religious aspects of your life offer some stability amid the social complexity. You participate in festivals honoring Aphrodite and other deities associated with love and beauty, ceremonies where your profession receives quasi-official recognition. These religious observances provide community connections and spiritual grounding, reminding you that your work has ancient precedents and sacred traditions, even if Athenian society increasingly views those connections as metaphorical rather than literal. As you age, the long-term sustainability of your career becomes a pressing concern that keeps you awake during those quiet hours after symposiums end. Unlike the Egyptian courtesans with their tomb preparations or Babylonian temple prostitutes with institutional support, you must plan for a future that depends entirely on your ability to save money and maintain friendships that survive the fading of physical beauty. Some hetairai successfully transition into roles as cultural hostesses or business managers, while others face poverty when their intellectual charms can no longer compensate for the inevitable effects of time. The philosophical irony of your situation would amuse Socrates himself. You've achieved intellectual equality with men by commodifying both your mind and body, gaining freedom through a profession that others consider enslaving. You engage in the highest forms of human discourse while navigating the most basic economic necessities, embodying the contradictions that define classical civilization itself. The stench of rotting fish and human waste assaults your nostrils as you descend from Athens' intellectual heights into Rome's Subura district, where sophistication gives way to raw survival and the philosophical discussions are replaced by the literal howling of women advertising their services like wild animals. You're walking through narrow, garbage-strewn streets around 100C, where multi-story tenements block out most sunlight, and the air thrums with desperate energy that makes Greek symposiums seem like genteel tea parties. Welcome to the world of the lupi, the she-wolves of Rome, where your education means nothing and your ability to attract customers from the street determines whether you eat tonight. The term, lupa, isn't exactly flattering. Romans literally called you a female wolf, referencing both the legendary founder's origin story and the animalistic sounds you're expected to make while soliciting business. You howl, bark, and make other wolf-like noises from doorways and windows, competing with dozens of other women in an acoustic marketplace that would violate every noise ordinance ever written. The customers seem to find this charming, though you suspect it's more about the theatrical spectacle than genuine animal attraction. After experiencing the refined conversations of Athenian Hetaira, reduced to literally barking for business feels like the world's most depressing career downgrade. Your working conditions represent a dramatic departure from previous luxuries. Instead of elegant quarters with imported furniture, you operate from small, cramped cells called fornaces, which gave us the English word fornication, though the Romans probably weren't thinking about linguistic etymology while conducting business. These spaces barely accommodate a narrow bed and perhaps a small table for personal belongings. The walls are thin enough that everyone can hear everyone else's professional activities, creating a constant cacophony that makes privacy impossible and sleep elusive. Think of it as the ancient world's worst co-working space, except instead of laptops and coffee, it's bodies and desperation. The economic realities of Subura prostitution are brutally straightforward. You keep a percentage of what customers pay, with the remainder going to pimps, building owners, or organized crime figures who control territory like ancient mob bosses. Unlike Greek Hetaira with their intellectual premium pricing, you're competing primarily on price and availability rather than conversation skills or cultural sophistication. A typical transaction lasts minutes rather than hours, meaning you need volume to survive, which explains why efficiency becomes more important than enjoyment for anyone involved. Roman law treats you as simultaneously legal and degraded, a contradiction that defines your entire social existence. Prostitution itself isn't illegal. It's regulated, taxed, and considered a necessary social institution that protects respectable women from male desires. However, you're officially classified as infamous, meaning you've lost most legal rights and social protections that other citizens enjoy. You can't marry into respectable families, testify in court, or participate in religious ceremonies. It's like being legally declared a non-person while performing services the state considers essential for public order. Your daily routine begins before dawn with the unglamorous tasks of cleaning your workspace, checking for bedbugs, and trying to make yourself presentable with limited resources. Roman makeup consists of white lead for pale complexion, remember that poisonous Egyptian kohl, red ochre for cheeks and lips, and various plant dyes for dramatic eye effects. You apply these cosmetics by lamplight in tiny mirrors, knowing that daylight will reveal imperfections you can't afford to have. Personal hygiene involves cold water from public fountains and whatever soap-like substances you can afford, which isn't much given your economic situation. The clientele in Subura ranges from laborers spending their daily wages to wealthy men slumming for exotic experiences they can't get at home. You develop the ability to assess customers quickly, identifying those likely to pay without causing trouble versus those who might become violent or try to cheat you. Roman men often view violence against prostitutes as acceptable entertainment, meaning you must balance assertiveness with submission, strength with vulnerability. It's psychological warfare disguised as customer service, and the stakes are your physical safety. Historians still argue whether the lupi represented the bottom tier of Roman prostitution or if even lower categories existed in the empire's vast underworld. Archaeological evidence from Pompeii suggests some prostitutes worked in conditions that made Subura seem luxurious, while literary sources indicate certain lupi accumulated enough wealth to retire comfortably. What's clear is that Roman society created an elaborate hierarchy of sexual services, with your position determined by factors including physical appearance, age, ethnic background, and ability to navigate the complex social codes that govern the trade. The religious aspects of your work connect to ancient fertility traditions, though by the imperial period these connections have become largely symbolic. You might participate in festivals honoring Venus or other love deities, but these celebrations often feel more like community gatherings for social outcasts than genuine spiritual observances. Some lupi maintain private shrines with small offerings to protective deities, hoping divine intervention might improve their circumstances or at least prevent disease and violence. Your relationships with other women in the neighborhood provide essential emotional support and practical survival strategies. You share information about dangerous customers, effective self-defense techniques, and opportunities for better-paying clients. These friendships often represent your only genuine human connections in a profession that isolates you from conventional social networks. The solidarity among lupi serves as both protection and sanity preservation in an environment designed to dehumanize everyone involved. The contrast with your previous incarnations becomes painfully obvious during Rome's quiet hours. Gone are the intellectual stimulation of Greek symposiums, the luxury of Egyptian palaces, or even the religious significance of Babylonian temples. You're reduced to the most basic economic transaction, immediate physical gratification in exchange for coins, stripped of cultural pretensions or spiritual meaning. Yet somehow you endure, finding small moments of humanity amid the brutality, brief connections that remind you that even she-wolves deserve kindness occasionally. As another Roman dawn breaks over the Subura's crowded tenements, you prepare for another day of howling for customers while remembering when your predecessors discussed philosophy and advised pharaohs. The fall from grace feels complete, but history suggests this isn't the end of your story, just the darkest chapter before circumstances change again. The lupi's howls fade into distant memory as you find yourself ascending the marble steps of the Hippodrome in Constantinople, where circus acrobatics and theatrical performances mask your true profession while positioning you for the most dramatic social elevation in Courtesans' history. Your Theodora, yes, that Theodora, around 520 CE, balancing on tightropes both literal and metaphorical as you navigate from performing scandalous acts on stage to catching the attention of the future Emperor Justinian. The transformation from circus entertainer to Byzantine empress represents the ultimate rags-to-riches story, though the journey involves compromises that would make your Roman predecessors blush. Your early career combines theatrical performance with prostitution in ways that blur the lines between entertainment and exploitation. Byzantine circus culture embraces sexuality as spectacle, with performances that push boundaries of public decency while maintaining plausible deniability about their true nature. You strip on stage as part of artistic performances, engage in mock sexual acts with other performers, and participate in elaborate productions that serve as foreplay for the paying audience's subsequent private arrangements. Think of it as dinner theater, except dinner is optional and the theater is explicitly pornographic. The social stigma attached to your profession extends beyond typical courtesan marginalization into active legal persecution. Byzantine law inherited Roman restrictions on performers and prostitutes, meaning you're officially classified as infamous with limited legal rights and social mobility. You can't marry into respectable families, hold public office, or even enter certain religious buildings. The irony of eventually becoming empress while technically being legally prohibited from marrying respectably isn't lost on history's observers, though at the time, you're too focused on survival to appreciate the future cosmic joke. Your daily routine balances performance preparation with the exhausting emotional labor of maintaining multiple patron relationships. The circus world operates on intricate social hierarchies where senior performers control access to better roles, wealthy patrons determine who receives expensive gifts, and theater managers decide who gets featured in popular productions. You navigate these relationships with the political sophistication that will later serve you well in imperial courts, learning to read people's motivations, manipulate social dynamics, and present different versions of yourself depending on the audience. The economic model of circus prostitution provides more stability than street walking but less autonomy than elite courtesan arrangements. You receive a percentage of gate receipts from performances, plus private payments from individual patrons, minus expenses for costumes, makeup, and the various fees charged by theater managers. The mathematics of survival require constant calculation, balancing the income from degrading public performances against the better money available from private arrangements with wealthy men who view your theatrical notoriety as exotic entertainment. Your relationship with Justinian begins as typical patron-courtesan arrangement, but evolves into something unprecedented in Byzantine history. He's initially attracted by your theatrical reputation and sophisticated conversation. Remember, you've learned to entertain intellectually as well as physically. However, the relationship deepens into genuine affection that survives political opposition, family pressure, and social scandal. The future emperor's willingness to change laws allowing him to marry you represents either the greatest love story or most successful seduction in imperial history, depending on your perspective. The political implications of your background create ongoing challenges even after achieving imperial status. Byzantine court factions never fully accept your legitimacy, using your circus origins to undermine your authority and question your fitness for imperial responsibilities. You face constant whispers about your sexual past, snide comments about theatrical training, and suggestions that your influence over Justinian stems from bedroom manipulation rather than political acumen. These attacks force you to prove your worth repeatedly through demonstrated competence in areas ranging from legal reform to military strategy. Historians still argue whether your rise represents genuine merit overcoming social prejudice or exceptional luck combined with sexual manipulation of a powerful man. The historical record suggests both factors played roles. You possessed genuine intelligence and political skill, but you also leveraged your intimate relationship with Justinian to access power normally denied to women of any background. Your subsequent achievements as empress, including legal reforms protecting women's rights and sophisticated diplomatic maneuvering during political crises, suggest your capabilities extended far beyond bedroom skills. Your transformation from circus performer to imperial co-ruler required completely reinventing your public image while never fully escaping your past. You adopted the elaborate court dress, formal speaking style, and religious observances expected of Byzantine empresses, but opponents constantly reminded everyone of your previous career. The psychological pressure of maintaining imperial dignity while knowing that half the court had seen you perform naked on stage would challenge anyone's mental health. Yet you not only survived but thrived, wielding power with confidence that intimidated seasoned politicians. The religious dimensions of your story add another layer of complexity to an already remarkable narrative. Christianity officially condemned your former profession, yet you became one of the most influential Christian empresses in Byzantine history. You patronized churches, supported theological debates, and used imperial resources to advance Christian causes, while never publicly acknowledging the contradiction between your past and your faith. Perhaps the cognitive dissonance was manageable because everyone involved understood that survival often requires moral flexibility. Your legacy as Theodora demonstrates both the possibilities and limitations facing courtesans throughout history. You achieved unprecedented social elevation, wielded genuine political power, and proved that intelligence and determination could overcome even the most disadvantaged origins. However, your success remained unique. Later courtesans could point to your story as inspiration, but none replicated your extraordinary rise from circus performer to imperial throne. You represent the exception that proves the rule about social mobility's limitations in pre-modern societies. As you stand on the imperial balcony overlooking Constantinople's bustling harbors, watching ships arrive from across the known world, you remember howling in Rome's Subura and performing in circus tents. The journey from those degraded circumstances to wielding power over an empire spanning 3 continents illustrates both human resilience and the random nature of historical change. Your story becomes legend, but for every Theodora who achieved impossible heights, thousands of other courtesans lived and died in obscurity, their struggles unrecorded by history, but no less significant for being forgotten. The Byzantine court's marble corridors fade as you drift eastward to Tang Dynasty China, where the delicate plucking of pipa strings replaces imperial proclamations and your success depends less on political maneuvering than on composing the perfect couplet about autumn chrysanthemums. You're floating through Chang'an's pleasure quarters around 750 C, the world's largest city humming with cosmopolitan energy as merchants from Persia, India, and Central Asia mingle in streets wider than Roman highways. As a singing girl, or Changji, you inhabit a world where poetry determines your social rank more surely than beauty, and where a well-crafted verse can earn you a patron's devotion or a rival's deadly enmity. Your daily routine revolves around mastering the cultural refinements that Tang society values above all else. You spend hours practicing calligraphy, your brush strokes flowing across silk scrolls as you copy classic poems and compose original verses that showcase both technical skill and emotional depth. The Chinese characters must be perfectly balanced, each stroke demonstrating years of disciplined practice, because wealthy patrons judge your education as much through visual artistry as through musical performance. Think of it as being graded on both your essay content and handwriting, except failure means losing clients who might support you for years. The musical demands of your profession require encyclopedic knowledge of traditional songs, contemporary compositions, and the ability to improvise variations that display personal creativity while respecting classical forms. You master multiple instruments, the pipa's haunting tones, the guqin's scholarly sophistication, and various flutes and percussion instruments that accompany different performance styles. Your voice must handle everything from folk ballads to complex operatic pieces, adapting to intimate private performances or large banquet entertainments where you compete with dozens of other performers for audience attention. The Tang Dynasty's international character creates unique opportunities and challenges for your career. Chang'an attracts visitors from across the known world, each bringing different cultural expectations and aesthetic preferences. Persian merchants might appreciate bold, sensual performances that would scandalize Confucian scholars, while Buddhist monks seeking entertainment require subtle spiritual themes woven into seemingly secular songs. You develop the chameleon-like ability to read your audience quickly and adjust your repertoire accordingly, essentially becoming a one-woman cultural exchange program. The economic structure of the singing girl profession offers more stability than most previous incarnations of your calling, though it's still precarious by modern standards. You might be owned by a pleasure house that provides food, lodging, and musical training in exchange for a percentage of your earnings, or you might operate independently while paying fees for performance spaces and protection from local authorities. The most successful singing girls accumulate enough wealth to purchase their freedom and establish their own entertainment houses, though this requires exceptional talent, careful financial management, and substantial luck in avoiding the political upheavals that regularly sweep through Chinese dynasties. Your social status occupies an ambiguous middle ground between respectable artisan and social outcast. Tang society officially values cultural refinement, meaning your musical and poetic skills earn genuine admiration even from people who disapprove of your profession's other aspects. Wealthy scholars might genuinely respect your artistic abilities while maintaining social distance appropriate to class differences. This creates opportunities for intellectual relationships that earlier courtesans could only dream of. You might spend evenings discussing philosophy with government officials or sharing poetry with celebrated writers, even if romantic involvement remains commercially motivated. The political dimensions of your work require careful navigation of court factions and regional power struggles that make Byzantine intrigue seem straightforward. Tang China's vast size and cultural diversity create countless opportunities for inadvertently offending powerful people through inappropriate song choices, misunderstood cultural references, or associations with the wrong political figures. You develop an almost supernatural sensitivity to social undercurrents, learning to avoid topics that might trigger dangerous reactions while maintaining the appearance of sophisticated engagement with contemporary issues. Historians still argue whether Tang Dynasty singing girls wielded genuine cultural influence, or simply reflected the aesthetic preferences of their male patrons. Some evidence suggests certain women shaped literary tastes and musical styles through their performances and compositions, while other sources indicate they primarily served as living embodiments of male fantasy about feminine refinement. What's documented is that several singing girls became celebrated poets whose works survived in major literary collections, suggesting their contributions extended beyond mere entertainment into lasting cultural achievement. Your relationships with other women in the pleasure quarters provide essential support networks and professional development opportunities. Senior singing girls mentor newcomers in everything from vocal technique to client management, creating informal educational systems that preserve and transmit cultural knowledge across generations. These relationships often involve complex mixtures of genuine affection, professional rivalry, and economic cooperation. You might collaborate on performances while competing for the same wealthy patrons, requiring diplomatic skills that would challenge experienced ambassadors. The religious aspects of your life blend Buddhism, Taoism, and Confucian ethics in ways that somehow make your profession spiritually meaningful despite its obvious moral complications. You might compose songs that explore Buddhist concepts of impermanence and suffering, finding genuine spiritual insight in the temporary nature of beauty and human desire. Taoist philosophy offers frameworks for understanding the natural cycles of attraction and separation that define your professional relationships, while Confucian ideals of cultural refinement provide standards for measuring artistic achievement. Your living quarters reflect the aesthetic sophistication expected of your profession: silk hangings painted with mountain landscapes, porcelain tea sets for entertaining intimate guests, and carefully arranged fresh flowers that demonstrate seasonal awareness and artistic sensitivity. Your personal library contains poetry collections, musical notation, and philosophical texts that serve both professional and personal purposes. The space functions as both workplace and sanctuary, designed to impress clients while providing private refuge from the emotional demands of constant performance. As you prepare for another evening of entertaining Tang Dynasty's cultural elite, you realize how far you've traveled from those howling Roman wolves or even Byzantine circus performances. Your profession has evolved into something approaching artistic respectability, where intellectual accomplishment matters as much as physical appeal. Yet the fundamental economic realities remain unchanged. You're still dependent on male patronage and social acceptance of your unconventional lifestyle, still walking the tightrope between respectability and marginalization that defines every courtesan's existence throughout history. The refined melodies of Chinese poetry dissolve into the steamy chaos of medieval European bathhouses, where communal nudity masquerades as public hygiene and your profession hides behind the respectable facade of soap distribution and back-scrubbing services. You're navigating the slippery wooden floors of a German bathhouse around 1300 C, where the line between legitimate bathing establishment and brothel blurs like soap bubbles and candlelight. The transition from Tang Dynasty cultural refinement to medieval European pragmatism feels like stepping from a silk painting into a Bruegel peasant scene: less aesthetic sophistication, more earthy reality, and significantly more body odor. The bathhouse culture of medieval Europe creates unique opportunities for your profession by providing plausible deniability about what actually transpires in those steamy chambers. Officially, you're employed as a bath attendant helping customers with washing, massage, and general hygiene maintenance, services that urban medieval society genuinely needs given the limited bathing facilities in most homes. Unofficially, everyone understands that bathhouses offer intimate services that go well beyond soap application, creating an environment where prostitution operates semi-legally under the guise of personal care assistance. It's like working at a spa, except the happy endings aren't metaphorical and the health inspectors are more concerned with moral violations than sanitary conditions. Your daily routine begins with preparing the bathhouse for business, stoking fires to heat massive cauldrons of water, arranging wooden tubs in private alcoves, and mixing various herbal concoctions that supposedly enhance the bathing experience. The physical labor is considerable, requiring you to haul heavy buckets of hot water, scrub wooden surfaces clean, and maintain fires that must burn continuously to keep the establishment functional. By the time customers arrive, you're already exhausted from preparatory work that would challenge a modern gym enthusiast, yet you must still maintain an appearance of fresh availability for whatever services clients might require. The clientele reflects medieval urban society's full spectrum, from wealthy merchants seeking luxury relaxation to common laborers spending their weekly wages on their only opportunity for hot water and female companionship. You develop expertise in reading social cues that indicate each customer's expectations and financial limitations, adjusting your services accordingly. Wealthy patrons might expect elaborate bathing rituals followed by private chamber entertainment, while working-class clients typically want efficient washing assistance with minimal frills. The psychological demands of shifting between these different service levels while maintaining appropriate enthusiasm for each interaction would exhaust a modern customer service professional. The legal status of bathhouse prostitution exists in the gray area between tolerance and prohibition that characterizes much of medieval sexuality. Church authorities officially condemn your activities as sinful, while secular authorities collect taxes and fees that suggest official acceptance of your profession's economic value. This creates constant uncertainty about your legal protections and social standing. You might be arrested during a moral reform campaign one week and serving city officials the next. The cognitive dissonance required to navigate these contradictory social messages while maintaining professional composure deserves recognition as a specialized skill. Medieval hygiene standards add another layer of challenge to your working conditions. The bathhouse environment breeds diseases that modern medicine would consider preventable with basic sanitation, yet you must maintain intimate contact with multiple clients daily while having limited understanding of disease transmission. You develop folk medicine knowledge about herbs and treatments that might prevent illness, but essentially you're gambling with your health every time you work. The irony of providing cleaning services while operating in conditions that would horrify modern health inspectors isn't lost on you, though survival concerns outweigh philosophical reflections about occupational hazards. Your relationships with other bathhouse workers create essential support systems in an environment that isolates you from conventional social networks. The women working alongside you understand the unique stresses of your profession, the physical exhaustion, emotional labor, and constant anxiety about legal prosecution or customer violence. You share survival strategies, warn each other about dangerous clients, and provide mutual support during illness or pregnancy. These friendships often represent your most genuine human connections, offering solidarity that helps maintain sanity in an inherently degrading situation. The seasonal nature of medieval urban life affects your profession in ways that earlier courtesans didn't experience. Winter months bring increased demand for hot baths and warm companionship, but also heating costs that reduce profit margins and working conditions that become almost unbearable. Summer heat makes the bathhouse environment stifling, while reducing demand for hot water services that provide cover for other activities. You must adjust your income expectations and survival strategies according to weather patterns, essentially becoming a seasonal worker in addition to all your other professional challenges. Historians still argue whether medieval bathhouse culture represented relative sexual freedom compared to other periods or simply more visible documentation of persistent prostitution practices. Archaeological evidence from bathhouse excavations suggests these establishments operated with remarkable consistency across different European regions, while church records indicate ongoing moral campaigns against their influence. What's clear is that bathhouses provided one of the few spaces where medieval women could earn independent income, even if that independence came with significant physical and social risks. The religious tensions surrounding your work create daily psychological stress that compounds the physical demands of the job. You live in a society that simultaneously condemns your profession as sinful while tolerating its existence as practically necessary. Church teachings about sexuality conflict with economic realities that make your services valuable to urban communities, creating moral confusion that affects everyone involved. You might attend religious services seeking spiritual comfort, knowing that the same clergy who preach about sexual purity depend on taxes paid by your establishment. Your living arrangements typically involve cramped quarters above or adjacent to the bathhouse, spaces that smell perpetually of wet wood and herbal soap mixtures. Privacy is minimal, personal possessions are few, and the constant humidity creates living conditions that promote mold, insects, and respiratory problems. Yet these accommodations represent stability that many medieval women lack. You have shelter, regular meals, and protection from some forms of violence that threaten women without institutional affiliations. As evening approaches and the last fires die down in the bathhouse cauldrons, you clean yourself with the same soaps and herbs you've applied to countless customers throughout the day. The physical intimacy of your work contrasts sharply with the emotional distance required for psychological survival, creating internal tensions that medieval society provides few resources for resolving. Tomorrow brings another day of scrubbing, heating, and serving, another round of maintaining professional cheerfulness while navigating the gap between official morality and practical reality that defines your existence in the steamy world of medieval bathhouse culture. The steam and soap of European bathhouses evaporate as you find yourself transported to the golden age of Islamic civilization, where the House of Wisdom in Baghdad rivals any library ever built, and your education as a Chiyan encompasses everything from advanced mathematics to the subtle art of improvising gazelles that make grown men weep. You're reclining in silk cushions around 950 C, surrounded by scholars who debate whether Aristotle understood infinity while you tune your oud and prepare to perform poetry that synthesizes Persian mysticism, Arabic eloquence, and your own lived experience of navigating love's complexities in a civilization that's reached heights of intellectual achievement that won't be matched for centuries. The educational requirements for becoming a successful Chiyan far exceed anything your predecessors experienced, representing perhaps the most intellectually demanding incarnation of the courtesan profession in human history. You must master classical Arabic poetry and its intricate prosodic rules, memorize hundreds of traditional songs and their regional variations, and demonstrate competence in subjects ranging from astronomy to theology that would challenge university professors. Your training includes not only musical performance but also debate techniques, philosophical reasoning, and the ability to compose original poetry that meets the sophisticated standards of a culture that considers verse composition the highest form of human expression. Think of it as earning multiple graduate degrees, except your dissertation defense involves entertaining drunk caliphs while maintaining artistic integrity. The cultural environment of Abbasid Baghdad creates unprecedented opportunities for intellectual courtesans. The city attracts scholars from across the known world, Greek philosophers, Indian mathematicians, Persian poets, and African astronomers gather in libraries and salons where knowledge flows as freely as wine, despite official religious prohibition. As a Chiyan, you participate in these intellectual exchanges not merely as decoration but as a contributing member whose insights earn genuine respect. You might spend afternoons discussing Ptolemaic astronomy with court mathematicians and evenings performing songs that incorporate those same astronomical concepts into lyrics about cosmic love and temporal beauty. Your living situation reflects the cultural sophistication expected of your profession. Your quarters contain extensive libraries with works in multiple languages, scientific instruments for studying music theory and mathematics, and art collections that demonstrate aesthetic refinement valued by your elite clientele. The space functions as both performance venue and scholarly retreat, designed to facilitate intellectual conversation as well as intimate entertainment. Your personal book collection might include rare manuscripts on subjects ranging from medicine to metaphysics, creating a resource that scholars from across the Islamic world come to consult. The economic model of the Chiyan system provides remarkable stability and independence compared to previous incarnations of your profession. The most successful Chiyan operate essentially as independent cultural entrepreneurs, maintaining their own establishments, managing patron relationships, and accumulating wealth that allows for genuine financial security. Some Chiyan become wealthy enough to patronize scholars and artists themselves, creating cultural salons that influence literary and musical development across the Islamic world. The profession offers a path to economic and intellectual autonomy that few women in any civilization have achieved. The religious complexities of your position require sophisticated theological navigation that would challenge trained Islamic scholars. Official Islamic teaching condemns extramarital sexuality, yet the Chiyan institution operates with implicit acceptance from religious and secular authorities. You develop nuanced understanding of Islamic law, mystical philosophy, and theological debate that allows you to discuss religious topics intelligently while avoiding doctrinal controversies that might threaten your position. Some Chiyan incorporate Sufi mystical concepts into their poetry and performances, exploring themes of divine love that blur the boundaries between earthly and spiritual passion. Your relationships with the era's greatest intellectuals create opportunities for genuine scholarly collaboration that transcend typical patron-courtesan dynamics. You might collaborate with famous poets on new verse forms, contribute to mathematical treatises through your knowledge of musical ratios and proportions, or provide cultural insights that influence philosophical works. Several Chiyen are credited with original contributions to Arabic literature that survived in major anthology collections, suggesting their intellectual achievements extended beyond entertainment into lasting cultural significance. The political dimensions of your work require navigating the complex factional struggles that characterize Abbasid court life. Different Chiyen align with various political figures, creating networks of cultural influence that parallel formal diplomatic relationships. Your salon might become a meeting ground for political plotting, intellectual debate, and artistic creation, requiring diplomatic skills that would challenge professional ambassadors. The wrong political association can destroy your career or even threaten your life, while the right connections can elevate you to unprecedented influence. Historians still argue whether the Chiyen represented genuine female intellectual empowerment, or simply reflected male fantasy about educated women who remained sexually available. The historical record contains evidence supporting both interpretations. Some Chiyen clearly wielded substantial cultural influence and accumulated significant wealth, while others remained dependent on male patronage despite their educational achievements. What's documented is that several Chiyen became sufficiently famous that their biographies were recorded in major historical works, suggesting their contemporaries considered them significant cultural figures rather than mere entertainers. The international character of Islamic civilization during this period exposes you to cultural influences from across the known world. Your musical repertoire might include elements from Byzantine church music, Indian ragas, Central Asian folk traditions, and African rhythmic patterns, creating synthetic art forms that reflect the cosmopolitan nature of Islamic culture. You serve as both cultural preservationist and innovator, maintaining traditional forms while incorporating new influences that keep the art alive and evolving. Your daily routine balances intense intellectual work with the performance demands that sustain your career. Mornings might be spent studying new philosophical texts or composing original poetry, afternoons practicing musical techniques or collaborating with other artists, and evenings entertaining patrons who expect both intellectual stimulation and intimate companionship. The cognitive demands of shifting between scholarly analysis and emotional performance while maintaining artistic standards that satisfy the most sophisticated audiences in the world would exhaust modern professional entertainers. As the call to prayer echoes across Baghdad's minarets, and you prepare for another evening of entertaining the Islamic world's cultural elite, you reflect on how far the courtesan profession has evolved since those Babylonian temple days. You've achieved intellectual respectability that rivals university professors, economic independence that exceeds most merchants, and cultural influence that extends across civilizations. Yet the fundamental paradox remains: your achievements depend on commodifying both intellect and intimacy, gaining freedom through a profession that others consider constraining. The golden age of Islamic civilization has created space for your talents to flourish, but history suggests such opportunities remain exceptional rather than typical for women in your profession. The scholarly debates of Baghdad fade as you cross cultural boundaries to emerge in Heian period Japan, where the whisper of silk kimonos replaces philosophical discussions and your success depends on mastering aesthetic subtleties so refined they would make Islamic Chiyen seem like enthusiastic amateurs. You're kneeling in perfect Seiza position around 1000 C in Kyoto's pleasure quarters, your shamisen balanced delicately across silk-covered knees as you prepare to perform for aristocrats whose aesthetic sensitivity makes medieval European nobles look like cave dwellers. Welcome to the origins of geisha culture, where every gesture carries meaning, every color combination tells a story, and a single misplaced ornament can destroy your reputation faster than you can say, "Cherry blossom." The aesthetic demands of your profession require encyclopedic knowledge of cultural codes that govern everything from seasonal flower arrangements to the proper depth of bowing for different social ranks. You must master not only musical performance but also the elaborate tea ceremony, classical dance forms that take decades to perfect, and conversation techniques that allow you to discuss poetry without appearing overly intellectual or boring. Japanese court culture values subtlety above all else. The ability to suggest rather than state, to hint rather than declare, to create atmosphere through small gestures that less refined people might not even notice. Think of it as performing advanced emotional archaeology, where you're constantly digging for the perfect artistic response to unspoken social cues. Your daily routine begins before dawn with elaborate preparation rituals that would exhaust a modern fashion model. The process of applying traditional white face powder, drawing precise eyebrow lines, and painting your lips into the perfect bow shape requires artistic skill and steady hands that come only through years of practice. Your kimono selection involves complex calculations about seasonal appropriateness, color harmonies, and symbolic meanings that communicate your cultural sophistication to observers who can read these visual codes. The obi alone weighs enough to strain your back, tied with precision that requires assistance from trained dressers who understand the dozens of knot variations appropriate for different occasions. The musical requirements of your profession demand mastery of instruments that most modern musicians would find impossibly challenging. The shamisen 3 strings must produce sounds that evoke specific emotions: longing, melancholy, joy, through subtle variations in plucking technique and finger positioning. You memorize hundreds of traditional songs, each with regional variations and performance styles appropriate for different audiences. Your voice training focuses on producing the controlled, nasal tones that Japanese aesthetics consider beautiful, even though they sound strange to ears trained on other musical traditions. It's like learning to sing backwards while standing on your head, except the audience will judge your cultural refinement based on how effortlessly you make it appear. The social hierarchy of Japanese court life creates opportunities and limitations that differ significantly from previous incarnations of your profession. You serve aristocrats whose cultural sophistication rivals anything the Islamic world produced, but you're also trapped within rigid social structures that offer little mobility regardless of your talents. Your clients appreciate aesthetic refinement to degrees that border on obsession, spending hours discussing the proper color combinations for autumn leaf viewing or debating whether a particular poetry allusion demonstrates sufficient classical education. These conversations require intellectual engagement that rivals university seminars, except they're conducted in whispers while you pour tea with movements choreographed to demonstrate your cultural training. The economic realities of your situation involve complex patron relationships that can span decades of artistic and personal development. Unlike previous courtesans who primarily served short-term entertainment needs, you're expected to become a long-term cultural companion who grows more valuable as your aesthetic education deepens. Wealthy patrons invest in your training much like modern art collectors invest in promising artists, hoping your developing talents will reflect well on their own cultural sophistication. This creates stability but also dependency. Your artistic development remains tied to male financial support and approval, even as your skills surpass those of many officially recognized artists. Your living quarters reflect the aesthetic principles that govern your entire profession. Every element must demonstrate seasonal awareness, cultural knowledge, and artistic sensitivity that creates atmosphere conducive to refined entertainment. Your rooms change appearance throughout the year as you rotate decorations, flower arrangements, and textile choices to match seasonal themes that your clients expect you to understand intuitively. The space functions as both performance venue and artistic statement, communicating your cultural competence through visual harmony that takes years to achieve and constant attention to maintain. The religious aspects of your life blend Buddhism, Shintoism, and aesthetic philosophy in ways that somehow make your profession spiritually meaningful despite its obvious worldly focus. You might compose poems that explore Buddhist concepts of impermanence while arranging flowers that demonstrate Shinto principles of natural harmony. The Japanese ability to compartmentalize different belief systems allows you to find genuine spiritual meaning in activities that other cultures might consider purely commercial. Your artistic practice becomes a form of meditation that connects earthly beauty with transcendent truth, even when performed for clients whose motivations remain decidedly unspiritual. Historians still argue whether early geisha culture represented female artistic empowerment, or simply more sophisticated forms of male entertainment that happened to require genuine cultural education. The evidence suggests both interpretations contain truth. You develop artistic skills that rival professional performers, but within systems designed primarily to serve male aesthetic fantasies rather than female creative expression. What's documented is that several early geisha influenced Japanese artistic development in measurable ways, contributing to poetry collections, musical innovations, and aesthetic theories that shaped cultural evolution across centuries. Your relationships with other women in the pleasure quarters create support networks based on shared artistic pursuits as much as mutual survival needs. You study together, practice music in groups, and share knowledge about client preferences and cultural trends that affect your professional success. The competitive aspects of your profession are balanced by collaborative elements that recognize artistic development as a community effort requiring mutual support and knowledge sharing. These relationships often provide your most meaningful human connections, offering understanding that transcends the commercial aspects of your profession. The psychological demands of maintaining perfect aesthetic composure while navigating complex emotional relationships with clients who expect both artistic excellence and intimate companionship would challenge modern therapists. You learn to present different aspects of your personality depending on each patron's aesthetic preferences and emotional needs, essentially becoming a skilled character actress whose performance must appear completely natural and unrehearsed. The emotional labor required to maintain these relationships while preserving your own psychological health represents perhaps the most challenging aspect of your profession. As you kneel in moonlight filtering through rice paper screens, practicing shamisen melodies that capture the melancholy beauty of autumn leaves falling on temple grounds, you realize how your profession continues evolving toward greater artistic sophistication even as its fundamental economic realities remain unchanged. The aesthetic refinement of Japanese court culture has elevated your work to levels that approach genuine art, yet you remain dependent on male patronage and social acceptance of your unconventional role. The cherry blossoms will bloom again next spring, but your youth won't return, a reality that adds poignant urgency to every perfectly executed tea ceremony and precisely tuned musical performance. The delicate aesthetics of Heian Japan dissolve like morning mist as you cross an ocean and centuries to find yourself in the shadow of Tenochtitlan's towering pyramids around 1450 C, where the gentle plucking of shamisen strings is replaced by the thunderous beat of ceremonial drums, and your refined tea ceremonies give way to rituals that would make your Japanese patrons faint faster than cherry blossoms in a typhoon. You're standing on obsidian steps slick with morning dew, and other substances you'd rather not identify, preparing to serve gods whose appetites make mortal desires seem quaint by comparison. Welcome to the world of Aztec sacred courtesans, where your profession carries cosmic significance and the stakes are literally life and death. Your role as an Awayanime, sacred courtesan, places you at the intersection of divine worship and earthly pleasure in ways that would confuse theologians for centuries. The Aztec understanding of sexuality as sacred force rather than shameful necessity creates a professional environment where your services honor the gods while serving human needs. You're not just entertaining wealthy patrons, you're participating in cosmic maintenance that keeps the universe functioning properly. The gods demand pleasure as tribute just as they require blood sacrifices, making your work essential to preventing universal collapse. It's like being a spiritual mechanic whose tools happen to involve intimate services, except the consequences of poor performance include drought, earthquakes, and the possible end of the fifth sun. The temple complex where you serve rises from Lake Texcoco like a man-made mountain designed to impress visiting deities and intimidate neighboring city-states. Your quarters occupy specially designated areas within the sacred precinct, decorated with murals depicting Zakiketzel, goddess of love and fertility, whose feathered serpent imagery reminds everyone that sexuality contains both creative and destructive potential. The walls display intricate calendrical calculations that determine which days favor different types of intimate rituals, because even divine pleasure must follow cosmic schedules that regulate universal harmony. Your sleeping chamber doubles as ritual space where you perform ceremonies that blur the boundaries between worship and entertainment. Your daily routine begins with purification rituals that would exhaust modern spa enthusiasts. You bathe in flower-scented water while reciting prayers to Tlazolteotl, goddess of purification and sin, asking her to cleanse both body and spirit for the sacred work ahead. Your diet includes specific foods believed to enhance spiritual energy and physical attractiveness, cacao drinks flavored with vanilla and chili peppers, amaranth cakes shaped like divine symbols, and exotic fruits imported from distant provinces. The Aztec belief that physical and spiritual health interconnect means your professional preparation involves both practical hygiene and religious observance that sanctifies your entire existence. The educational requirements of your profession include mastery of complex theological concepts that would challenge university students. You must understand the intricate relationships between different deities, their seasonal preferences, and the ritual protocols appropriate for various religious celebrations. Your knowledge of sacred calendar systems allows you to predict which gods require tribute on specific dates, helping temple administrators plan ceremonies that maintain cosmic balance. The Aztec pantheon includes dozens of deities with overlapping jurisdictions and competing demands, making your theological expertise essential for avoiding divine offense that could trigger supernatural catastrophes. Your clientele includes not only wealthy merchants and noble warriors but also priests whose religious duties require periodic release from celibacy vows through carefully regulated sacred encounters. These men approach your services as sacramental acts rather than simple pleasure-seeking, creating professional relationships that combine spiritual counseling with intimate companionship. You learn to read the psychological needs of men whose daily lives involve responsibilities for maintaining universal order through blood sacrifice and ritual precision. It's like being a therapist whose sessions happen to include physical intimacy blessed by divine mandate. The economic aspects of your profession operate within tribute systems that make medieval European feudalism look straightforward by comparison. Your earnings come partly from direct payments and partly from temple allocations funded by tribute collected from conquered territories across the expanding Aztec Empire. The cacao beans that serve as currency flow through your hands in quantities that reflect both personal success and the empire's economic health. Your financial security depends on imperial expansion that brings new tribute sources, making your prosperity tied to military conquests that you probably never witnessed directly. Historians still argue whether Aztec sacred prostitution represented genuine religious practice or elaborate justification for institutionalized exploitation that happened to involve cosmic imagery. The surviving codices suggest both interpretations contain elements of truth. Your work clearly held religious significance within Aztec worldview, but the power structures surrounding temple life remained male-dominated despite theoretical divine authorization. What's documented is that sacred courtesans influenced religious practices in measurable ways, contributing to ritual innovations and theological developments that shaped Aztec spiritual evolution. The seasonal festivals that punctuate your professional calendar create opportunities for elaborate public ceremonies where your services become community celebrations rather than private encounters. During Tlaxcatl, the Great Spring Festival, you participate in rituals that honor Tezcatlipoca through mock battles, flower wars, and sacred dramas that require months of preparation. Your performances during these festivals demonstrate artistic skills that rival professional entertainers while fulfilling religious obligations that maintain community favor with demanding deities. The crowds that gather for major ceremonies include thousands of people whose cosmic security depends partly on your successful ritual participation. Your relationships with other sacred courtesans create support networks based on shared religious duties as much as mutual survival needs. You study theology together, practice ritual dances, and share knowledge about divine preferences that affect both spiritual efficacy and professional success. The competitive aspects of temple life are balanced by collaborative elements that recognize religious service as community effort requiring cooperation and shared expertise. These relationships often provide your most meaningful human connections within institutional settings designed primarily to serve divine rather than human needs. The psychological demands of maintaining spiritual composure while navigating intimate relationships with clients who expect both religious authenticity and physical satisfaction would challenge modern counselors. You learn to embody different aspects of divine femininity depending on each patron's spiritual needs and cosmic obligations, essentially becoming a skilled religious actress whose performance must appear completely natural and divinely inspired. The emotional labor required to maintain these relationships while preserving your own psychological health represents perhaps the most challenging aspect of serving gods whose demands never cease. As you stand atop Tenochtitlan's great temple watching the sun set over the lake that cradles your magnificent city, you understand how your profession serves purposes larger than individual pleasure or economic survival. You're helping maintain the cosmic order that keeps the fifth sun burning in the heavens above. The drums of Tenochtitlan fade into echoes across centuries as you trade obsidian pyramids for marble palazzos, finding yourself in Renaissance Venice around 1520 CE, where the cosmic responsibilities of serving Aztec gods give way to the earthly art of serving Renaissance intellectuals whose egos rival divine appetites, and whose cultural pretensions make Aztec theology seem refreshingly straightforward. You're reclining on silk cushions in a candlelit salon overlooking the Grand Canal, your latest sonnet manuscript balanced on your knee as you prepare to discuss Platonic philosophy with patrons who believe combining intellectual discourse with intimate companionship represents the height of civilized sophistication. Welcome to the world of courtisani honest courtesans, where your success depends on literary talent as much as physical beauty, and a poorly argued philosophical point can damage your reputation faster than you can say. Renaissance humanism. Your status as an educated courtesan places you among Venice's most influential cultural figures, wielding intellectual authority that would make university professors jealous if they weren't secretly patronizing your services themselves. The Renaissance celebration of human potential creates unprecedented opportunities for women willing to develop their minds along with their more traditional professional assets. You're not just entertaining wealthy merchants. You're participating in the cultural revolution that's reshaping European civilization through rediscovered classical learning and innovative artistic expression. Your salon serves as an unofficial university where ideas flow as freely as expensive wine, making your intellectual contributions essential to the humanist movement that's transforming Western thought. The palazzo where you conduct business rises from the Venetian lagoon like a testament to the wealth generated by international trade and the sophisticated tastes money can purchase. Your reception rooms display classical sculptures, Renaissance paintings, and libraries that would impress visiting scholars from across Europe. The furnishings reflect your personal aesthetic choices rather than institutional requirements, allowing you to create environments that encourage both intellectual discourse and intimate relaxation. Your living quarters function as both performance space and genuine residence, demonstrating cultural refinement through artistic objects that communicate your educational achievements to clients who value intellectual sophistication as highly as physical pleasure. Your daily routine includes scholarly activities that would exhaust modern graduate students. You rise early to read Latin poetry, study Greek philosophy, and practice musical compositions on the lute, while your servants prepare elaborate meals designed to impress discerning palates. Your correspondence includes letters to and from leading intellectuals across Europe, discussing everything from Aristotelian ethics to innovative artistic techniques being developed in Florence and Rome. The Renaissance emphasis on individual achievement means your intellectual development becomes a professional necessity rather than personal luxury, making continuous learning essential for maintaining your competitive position in Venice's crowded cultural marketplace. The educational requirements of your profession demand mastery of classical languages, contemporary literature, musical performance, and conversational skills that allow you to discuss complex topics without appearing either ignorant or intimidatingly intellectual. You must understand the theological debates dividing Catholic and Protestant thinkers, the political implications of various Italian city-state alliances, and the artistic innovations being pioneered by masters like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo. Your knowledge of contemporary poetry allows you to quote appropriate verses during intimate conversations, while your understanding of classical mythology provides sophisticated allegories for discussing sensitive subjects that direct language might make awkward. Your clientele includes not only wealthy merchants and noble diplomats but also prominent artists, writers, and philosophers whose creative work shapes Renaissance cultural development. These men seek intellectual companionship that combines stimulating conversation with physical intimacy, creating professional relationships that resemble modern academic collaborations more than traditional commercial transactions. You learn to inspire creative work through discussions that challenge conventional thinking while providing emotional support that encourages artistic risk-taking. It's like being a muse whose services happen to include intimate companionship, except your intellectual contributions often surpass those of officially recognized scholars. The economic realities of your situation reflect Venice's position as Europe's wealthiest trading center, where international commerce generates fortunes that fund cultural patronage on unprecedented scales. Your earnings come from wealthy clients who view spending on cultural refinement as investments in social status rather than mere personal indulgence. The ducats that flow through your hands represent profits from spice trades, silk imports, and banking operations that connect Venice to markets across the known world. Your financial independence allows you to choose clients based on intellectual compatibility, as much as economic necessity, creating professional relationships that resemble genuine partnerships. Historians still argue whether Renaissance honest courtesans represented genuine female intellectual empowerment, or simply more sophisticated forms of male entertainment that happened to require genuine educational achievement. The surviving letters and literary works suggest both interpretations contain truth. You clearly developed intellectual capabilities that rivaled male scholars, but within systems designed primarily to serve male cultural fantasies rather than female creative expression. What's documented is that several famous courtesans influenced Renaissance intellectual development in measurable ways, contributing to literary movements, philosophical discussions, and artistic innovations that shaped European cultural evolution. The carnival season that dominates Venetian social life creates opportunities for elaborate mass celebrations where your services become community entertainment rather than private encounters. During these festivals, you participate in theatrical performances, poetic competitions, and philosophical debates that demonstrate your cultural accomplishments to audiences that include visiting dignitaries from across Europe. Your performances during Carnival demonstrate artistic skills that rival professional entertainers while fulfilling social obligations that maintain your reputation within Venice's competitive cultural hierarchy. The crowds that gather for major celebrations include intellectuals whose respect depends partly on your demonstrated scholarly achievements. Your relationships with other educated courtesans create intellectual networks based on shared literary interests as much as mutual professional support. You collaborate on poetry collections, discuss philosophical problems, and share knowledge about client preferences and cultural trends that affect both artistic development and commercial success. The competitive aspects of your profession are balanced by collaborative elements that recognize intellectual work as community effort requiring cooperation and knowledge sharing. These relationships often provide your most meaningful human connections within commercial settings that commodify even intimate conversation. The psychological demands of maintaining intellectual sophistication while navigating intimate relationships with clients who expect both scholarly discourse and physical satisfaction would challenge modern academics. You learn to embody different aspects of Renaissance femininity depending on each patron's intellectual interests and emotional needs, essentially becoming a skilled cultural performer whose expertise must appear completely natural and effortless. The emotional labor required to maintain these relationships while preserving your own creative integrity represents perhaps the most challenging aspect of serving men whose cultural appetites never cease. As you sit by your window watching gondolas glide through moonlit canals that carry the wealth of nations to your magnificent city, you compose verses that capture both the beauty of Renaissance achievement and the melancholy awareness that your intellectual gifts serve purposes ultimately controlled by others, no matter how sophisticated the philosophical frameworks that justify your refined servitude. The gondolas of Venice fade into memory, as you exchange Italian intellectual salons for the glittering halls of Versailles around 1680 CE, where Renaissance philosophical discussions give way to the deadly serious game of French court politics, and your success depends on navigating treacherous social currents that make Venetian intrigue look like children's parlor games. You're adjusting your elaborate court dress in the Hall of Mirrors, your reflection multiplied infinitely as you prepare to maneuver through conversations where a single misplaced word can mean exile or execution, and where your role as royal mistress carries political weight that could reshape European alliances. Welcome to the apex of courtly power, where being the king's favorite transforms you from educated entertainer into unofficial minister of state whose pillow talk influences treaties, wars, and the fate of nations. Your position as maitresse en titre, official royal mistress, places you at the center of French political machinery that operates through personal relationships rather than institutional procedures. The absolute monarchy of Louis XIV creates a system where royal favor determines everything from tax collection to military appointments, making your intimate influence over the Sun King's decisions more powerful than most government ministers. You're not just providing companionship to a wealthy patron, you're participating in statecraft that affects millions of lives across Europe and France's expanding colonial empire. Your bedroom conversations shape foreign policy, domestic legislation, and cultural patronage that influences everything from opera productions to cathedral construction projects. The palace complex where you hold court stretches across thousands of acres designed to demonstrate French power and sophistication to visiting dignitaries who report back to rival monarchs. Your apartments occupy some of Versailles' most prestigious locations, decorated with tapestries, paintings, and furniture that cost more than most nobles' annual incomes. The rooms function as both private residence and semi-official reception space where you conduct the informal diplomacy that often proves more effective than formal negotiations. Your daily routine includes audiences with petitioners, correspondence with foreign ambassadors, and strategic discussions with court officials who recognize your political influence even when they publicly pretend otherwise. The social demands of court life require mastery of etiquette protocols so complex they make Aztec religious ceremonies seem straightforward by comparison. Every gesture, clothing choice, and conversational topic must demonstrate appropriate awareness of hierarchical relationships that determine who speaks first, who sits where, and who receives royal attention during public ceremonies. You must understand the genealogical connections between hundreds of noble families, their historical grievances, current alliances, and marriage negotiations that affect political stability throughout the realm. The court operates like a theater where everyone performs roles determined by birth, royal favor, and careful calculation of advantage. Your daily schedule includes political briefings that would challenge modern cabinet ministers. You receive reports on military campaigns, economic conditions, diplomatic negotiations, and domestic unrest that require sophisticated understanding of statecraft and international relations. Your ability to discuss these topics intelligently with the king during private moments makes you an unofficial policy advisor whose recommendations carry weight precisely because they emerge from intimate rather than formal contexts. The information you gather through court gossip and private conversations often provides insights unavailable through official channels, making your political intelligence valuable to various factions competing for royal favor. The educational requirements of your position demand knowledge of contemporary philosophy, classical literature, musical composition, and artistic trends that allow you to participate meaningfully in cultural discussions that shape French intellectual development. You must understand the theological controversies surrounding Jansenism, the scientific innovations being pioneered at the newly founded Academy of Sciences, and the artistic principles governing the Baroque aesthetic that defines French cultural supremacy. Your patronage of artists, writers, and musicians makes you a significant cultural force whose preferences influence artistic development across Europe. Your relationships with other court women create networks of information exchange and mutual support that operate parallel to official political structures. You maintain correspondence with royal mistresses at other European courts, sharing intelligence about diplomatic developments and cultural trends that affect international relations. The competitive aspects of court life are balanced by collaborative elements that recognize survival depends on alliance building and information sharing among women whose informal power often exceeds that of male officials. These relationships provide both practical support and emotional sustenance within environments designed to isolate and control individual ambition. The economic realities of your situation reflect France's position as Europe's wealthiest and most powerful kingdom, where royal favor translates into financial rewards that rival the treasuries of smaller nations. Your income includes official pensions, informal gifts, and investment opportunities that generate wealth surpassing that of most European monarchs. The louis d'or that flows through your hands represents profits from taxation, colonial exploitation, and trade monopolies that fund French military adventures and cultural projects. Your financial independence allows you to patronize artists and writers whose work shapes European cultural development. Historians still argue whether royal mistresses wielded genuine political power or simply provided convenient scapegoats for unpopular policies that kings preferred to blame on feminine influence rather than personal responsibility. The surviving correspondence and policy documents suggest both interpretations contain truth. You clearly influenced major political decisions, but within systems designed to preserve ultimate male authority while allowing female participation in carefully controlled contexts. What's documented is that several royal mistresses shaped French political development in measurable ways, affecting everything from religious policy to colonial expansion. The religious dimensions of your role create theological contradictions that would perplex medieval scholars. You maintain public Catholic piety while living in obvious sin, attend Mass regularly while engaging in adultery that technically merits excommunication, and support church construction projects while undermining Christian marriage principles through your very existence. The French ability to compartmentalize religious and political concerns allows you to find genuine spiritual meaning in activities that strict theological interpretation would condemn. Your charitable works and religious patronage demonstrate sincere piety despite your unconventional personal circumstances. The psychological demands of maintaining political composure while navigating intimate relationships with men whose decisions affect millions of lives would challenge modern diplomats. You learn to separate personal emotions from political calculations, providing genuine affection while pursuing strategic objectives that may conflict with immediate romantic impulses. The emotional labor required to maintain these relationships while preserving your own psychological integrity represents perhaps the most challenging aspect of wielding power through personal influence rather than institutional authority. As you stand on Versailles' magnificent terrace watching the sun set over gardens that demonstrate French power to envious European rivals, you understand how your profession has evolved from ancient temple service to become a form of informal statecraft where personal relationships determine political outcomes that shape the destiny of nations. Yet your ultimate security still depends on maintaining the favor of men whose interests may not align with your own survival. The gilded excess of Versailles dissolves like morning mist as you trade French political intrigue for Ottoman imperial seclusion. Finding yourself behind the latticed windows of Topkapi Palace around 1650 where the open diplomacy of European courts gives way to the veiled machinations of the harem system and your success depends on mastering subtle power dynamics that make French court politics seem refreshingly transparent by comparison. You're adjusting your silk caftan in chambers overlooking the Bosphorus, preparing to navigate hierarchies where a single glance can elevate your status or doom you to obscurity, and where your path to influence requires patience, intelligence, and alliances forged through whispered conversations in marble-lined corridors. Welcome to the Ottoman harem, where the absence of formal power structures creates space for informal influence networks that can topple viziers and redirect imperial policy through carefully orchestrated feminine diplomacy. Your position within the imperial harem places you among hundreds of women competing for the sultan's attention, while simultaneously collaborating to maintain the delicate social order that keeps this parallel government functioning smoothly. The Ottoman system of royal seclusion creates opportunities for female political participation that European courts, for all their apparent openness, never quite achieve. You're not just seeking individual advancement. You're participating in collective governance that influences everything from provincial appointments to military campaigns through consensus building and strategic alliance formation that would impress modern political scientists. The harem operates like a sophisticated corporation where advancement depends on merit, timing, and the ability to build coalitions that transcend individual ambition. The palace complex where you live represents the pinnacle of Islamic architectural achievement, with courtyards, fountains, and gardens designed to create earthly paradise while maintaining absolute privacy from the outside world. Your quarters reflect your current status within the harem hierarchy, with furnishings and decorations that communicate your position to other residents who understand the visual language of Ottoman court culture. The spaces function as both living environment and political arena where informal meetings shape imperial policy through discussions that never appear in official records. Your daily life unfolds within architectural settings designed to inspire contemplation and encourage the kind of patient strategic thinking that effective harem politics requires. The educational opportunities available within the harem surpass those offered to most European women of your era. You study Arabic, Persian, and Turkish literature with scholars who provide instruction in classical poetry, religious texts, and historical chronicles that inform your understanding of Islamic civilization. Your musical training includes mastery of traditional instruments and vocal techniques that allow you to participate in cultural activities that demonstrate Ottoman refinement to visiting dignitaries. The harem's library contains manuscripts from across the Islamic world, providing access to intellectual traditions that European universities are only beginning to rediscover through translations of Arabic texts. Your daily routine includes participation in governing councils that address everything from household administration to imperial succession planning. The harem operates its own economy, legal system, and diplomatic network that parallels official Ottoman institutions while maintaining carefully regulated connections to the broader imperial administration. You learn to navigate complex relationships between different ethnic and religious groups represented within the harem, building alliances that cross cultural boundaries while respecting traditional hierarchies. The consensus-building skills required for effective harem politics translate directly into influence over imperial policy when your faction gains access to the Sultan's ear. The social hierarchies within the harem create advancement opportunities based on intelligence, cultural sophistication, and political acumen rather than birth or inherited status. Your progress through the ranks depends on demonstrating administrative competence, cultural refinement, and the ability to maintain harmonious relationships with women whose backgrounds span the Ottoman Empire's diverse territories. The meritocratic aspects of harem life offer genuine empowerment opportunities that coexist with obvious limitations imposed by gender segregation and royal control. Success requires mastering the paradox of wielding real power within systems designed to limit female public participation. Your relationships with other harem women create support networks that function as extended family units, providing emotional stability and practical assistance within environments that could otherwise become psychologically devastating. You form mentoring relationships with newer arrivals while learning from senior residents whose experience navigates the complex social dynamics that determine individual fate within the harem system. The collaborative aspects of harem life balance competitive elements through shared recognition that collective success enhances everyone's security and influence. These relationships often provide your most meaningful human connections within institutional settings designed primarily to serve imperial rather than personal needs. The economic aspects of harem life operate through complex systems of gift exchange, patronage networks, and investment opportunities that generate wealth independent of direct imperial support. Your income includes official allowances, informal payments from grateful petitioners, and profits from commercial ventures organized through harem-based partnerships that connect palace life to broader Ottoman economic systems. The financial independence achieved by successful harem members allows patronage of artistic and religious projects that demonstrate cultural sophistication while building political support among influential groups throughout the empire. Historians still argue whether the Ottoman harem system represented genuine female political empowerment or elaborate imprisonment that happened to include access to informal influence networks. The surviving archives suggest both interpretations contain elements of truth. You clearly wielded significant political power within carefully defined parameters, but within systems that ultimately preserved male authority while allowing substantial female participation in governance. What's documented is that several prominent harem members influenced Ottoman political development in measurable ways, affecting succession decisions, policy formation, and cultural patronage that shaped imperial evolution across centuries. The religious dimensions of harem life blend Islamic piety with mystical traditions that find spiritual meaning in communal living and collective service to divine purposes expressed through imperial governance. You participate in Sufi-inspired practices that emphasize inner development and spiritual purification while engaging in worldly activities that serve imperial interests. The Islamic ability to integrate contemplative and active life allows you to find genuine religious fulfillment in activities that serve both personal advancement and collective welfare. Your charitable works and religious patronage demonstrate sincere devotion despite your obviously privileged circumstances. The cultural activities that punctuate harem life create opportunities for artistic expression and intellectual development that rival anything available in European courts. You participate in poetry competitions, musical performances, and philosophical discussions that demonstrate Ottoman cultural sophistication while providing outlets for creative talents that might otherwise atrophy in confined environments. The festivals and celebrations that mark religious holidays and imperial occasions showcase harem contributions to Ottoman cultural life through elaborate productions that require months of collaborative preparation. The psychological demands of maintaining emotional equilibrium while navigating intimate relationships with other women whose ambitions may conflict with your own survival interests would challenge modern psychologists. You learn to balance genuine friendship with strategic calculation, providing mutual support while pursuing individual advancement that may require temporary abandonment of personal loyalties. The emotional intelligence required to maintain these relationships while preserving your own psychological integrity represents perhaps the most sophisticated aspect of succeeding within social systems that commodify even friendship and family bonds. As you stand by your window watching ships navigate the Bosphorus that connects Europe and Asia while carrying the wealth of 3 continents to your magnificent city, you recognize how your profession has evolved to encompass collective governance within gender-segregated systems that paradoxically offer genuine political participation through informal networks that European women, for all their apparent freedom, rarely achieve. The secluded courtyards of Topkapi fade into historical memory as you emerge from Ottoman seclusion into the surprisingly public world of early modern Venice around 1570 CE. Where the whispered politics of harem corridors give way to the brazen commercialism of Europe's first published catalogue of available companions, and your success depends on marketing skills that would impress modern advertising executives while navigating social attitudes that somehow make explicit commerce seem more respectable than hidden influence. You're posing for a woodcut illustration that will appear in Pietro Aretino's notorious guidebook, adjusting your décolletage while a printer's apprentice sketches your features for mass reproduction, preparing to become one of the first women in history whose professional services are advertised through published media that reaches international audiences. Welcome to the dawn of commercial publicity, where your intimate profession becomes subject to market forces, consumer reviews, and brand management strategies that transform personal relationships into commodified experiences. Your inclusion in Venice's infamous Catalogo di tutte le principali et più onorate cortigiani di Venezia represents a revolutionary development in how intimate services are advertised, regulated, and culturally understood throughout European society. The printing press technology that's transforming intellectual life also revolutionizes your profession by creating standardized marketing materials that reach potential clients across continental Europe. You're not just serving local patrons. You're participating in the emergence of international commerce and personal services that operates through published advertising rather than word-of-mouth reputation. The catalog functions like a primitive version of modern consumer guides, complete with prices, addresses, and detailed descriptions of services that would make contemporary marketing professionals blush while admiring the straightforward commercial approach. The Venetian publishing industry that produces your professional advertisement operates within legal frameworks that somehow manage to regulate intimate commerce while maintaining religious propriety through careful linguistic manipulation and official oversight. The catalog receives government approval through bureaucratic processes that treat your services as legitimate business enterprises subject to taxation, licensing, and quality control measures that protect both consumers and providers. Venice's reputation for commercial innovation extends to developing regulatory systems that balance moral concerns with economic realities, creating legal precedents that influence how other European cities address similar social challenges. Your daily routine includes marketing activities that would be familiar to modern entrepreneurs. You work with artists to create appealing visual representations, collaborate with writers to compose enticing textual descriptions, and coordinate with publishers to ensure your entry appears prominently within the catalog's organizational structure. The business skills required for effective self-promotion include understanding target demographics, competitive pricing strategies, and brand positioning that distinguishes your services from numerous competitors listed in the same publication. Success in this commercialized environment requires entrepreneurial thinking that combines traditional courtesanal skills with innovative marketing techniques. The international distribution of Venice's courtesan catalog creates opportunities for attracting wealthy tourists whose travel plans specifically include sampling locally famous intimate services advertised through published media. Your clientele expands to include German merchants, French diplomats, and English travelers who arrive in Venice with guidebooks that recommend specific courtesans based on published reviews and standardized pricing information. The catalog serves as both advertising medium and travel guide, helping visitors navigate Venice's complex social landscape while ensuring they locate the most suitable professional companions for their particular preferences and budgets. The economic implications of catalog-based advertising transform your profession from personal service industry into early form of mass marketing that operates through consumer choice mechanisms rather than traditional patronage relationships. Your income becomes directly tied to your catalog ranking, visual presentation, and textual description quality, creating financial incentives for continuous improvement in both services and marketing materials. The competition among catalog entries drives innovation in advertising techniques, pricing strategies, and service differentiation that influences broader commercial development throughout Venice's economy. Your success demonstrates how printing technology can revolutionize traditional industries through improved information distribution and consumer accessibility. The social attitudes reflected in Venice's willingness to publish explicit commercial advertising for intimate services reveal complex cultural negotiations between Christian moral teachings and practical economic necessities that characterize early modern European urban life. The catalog's existence suggests widespread social acceptance of regulated intimate commerce, even while church authorities officially condemn such activities through theological pronouncements that seem disconnected from actual urban social practices. This cultural contradiction creates space for your profession to operate openly while maintaining the fiction of moral disapproval that satisfies religious authorities without interfering with profitable commercial activities. Historians still argue whether published courtesan catalogs represented liberation through commercial transparency or exploitation through commodification that reduced complex human relationships to standardized consumer products. The surviving catalog entries suggest both interpretations contain truth. The explicit commercial framework clearly provided professional autonomy and financial opportunities, but within systems that treated intimate relationships as purchasable goods rather than personal connections. What's documented is that catalog-based advertising influenced European commercial development in measurable ways, pioneering marketing techniques and consumer choice mechanisms that shaped broader economic evolution. The artistic aspects of catalog production create opportunities for collaboration with prominent artists, writers, and publishers whose work shapes Renaissance cultural development beyond the immediate commercial purposes of courtesan advertising. Your portrait sessions contribute to artistic innovations in printmaking, portraiture, and commercial illustration that influence broader aesthetic development throughout European visual culture. The literary descriptions of your services require sophisticated writing skills that contribute to developing vernacular literature and commercial prose styles that influence how Italian language evolves during this crucial historical period. Your relationships with other cataloged courtesans create professional networks based on shared commercial interests and mutual recognition that success depends on maintaining industry standards that preserve public acceptance of regulated intimate commerce. You collaborate on pricing strategies, share information about client preferences, and coordinate marketing approaches that prevent destructive competition while encouraging service innovation. The collective aspects of catalog participation balance individual competitive elements through shared recognition that the industry's continued success requires maintaining professional standards that satisfy both consumers and regulatory authorities. The psychological demands of maintaining authentic personal connections while participating in commercialized systems that explicitly treat intimate relationships as purchasable commodities would challenge modern therapists. You learn to balance genuine human connection with commercial transaction requirements, providing meaningful experiences while acknowledging the fundamentally economic nature of catalog-mediated relationships. The emotional labor required to maintain professional standards while preserving psychological integrity represents perhaps the most complex aspect of succeeding within systems that commodify even the most intimate human interactions. The international influence of Venice's courtesan catalog spreads throughout European cities that begin developing their own published guides to local intimate services, creating networks of commercial information exchange that connect urban centers across continental Europe. Your participation in this emerging international industry places you at the forefront of commercial developments that influence how European society understands the relationship between personal services, market mechanisms, and regulatory oversight. The catalog system demonstrates how printing technology can transform traditional industries through improved information distribution and standardized commercial practices. As you review the final proofs of your catalog entry while watching printing apprentices prepare the woodcut blocks that will carry your image across Europe, you realize how your profession continues evolving toward greater commercial sophistication even as it maintains the fundamental human connections that have defined intimate service throughout history. Except now your personal relationships operate within market frameworks that treat even love as a commodity subject to consumer choice and competitive pricing. The bustling print shops of Venice fade into the smoke and steel of industrial revolution as you find yourself in 1850s London, where the catalog advertisements that once celebrated your profession now compete with moral reform movements and technological innovations that threaten to end millennia of traditions faster than you can say. Steam-powered morality. You're standing in a gaslit parlor on Regent Street, watching through lace curtains as factory smokestacks pierce the horizon like industrial cathedral spires, while temperance societies march past your window carrying banners that promise to cleanse society of all its ancient pleasures through the miraculous power of middle-class respectability and Christian virtue. The world is changing with mechanical precision, and your profession, which survived the fall of empires, religious revolutions, and countless moral crusades, finally faces forces that might actually succeed in consigning it to historical footnotes. The industrial transformation reshaping European society creates new economic opportunities for women that compete directly with traditional reasons for entering your profession. Factory work, domestic service, and emerging clerical positions offer alternatives to intimate commerce that previous generations never possessed, while expanding educational opportunities allow women to develop skills that open previously male-dominated professions. The steam engines that power textile mills also power social changes that provide economic independence without requiring the personal compromises that have always defined your work. You're witnessing the emergence of wage labor systems that, despite their obvious limitations and exploitative aspects, offer women choices that make your profession seem less like inevitable destiny and more like conscious decision among multiple alternatives. The moral reform movements gaining political influence throughout European and American cities specifically target your profession as symbol of social corruption that industrialized society must eliminate to achieve its full civilizing potential. The evangelical Christianity that fuels these reform efforts combines religious fervor with scientific rationalism to create powerful coalitions that possess both moral authority and political effectiveness. You're facing organized opposition that goes beyond traditional church condemnation to include systematic legal reforms, social work interventions, and public health initiatives designed to eliminate the social conditions that have historically sustained your profession across different cultures and centuries. Your daily routine now includes navigating increasingly complex legal restrictions that govern everything from advertising to location to client interactions through municipal regulations that treat your work as public health hazard rather than private commercial transaction. The professional discretion that once protected both you and your clients gives way to police surveillance, medical inspections, and bureaucratic oversight that transforms intimate relationships into regulated activities subject to governmental control. The personal autonomy that historically defined successful practitioners of your profession disappears beneath layers of legal supervision that make spontaneous human connection nearly impossible within officially sanctioned frameworks. The technological innovations that define industrial progress also transform how your profession operates and markets itself within rapidly changing urban environments. Gas lighting extends working hours while creating new safety concerns in neighborhoods where respectability increasingly depends on avoiding any association with traditional nighttime economies. The railroad networks that connect distant cities bring both new clients and unwanted attention from reform organizations that coordinate moral crusades across regional boundaries. telegraph communication allows rapid information sharing among reformers while also enabling more sophisticated law enforcement coordination that makes traditional methods of avoiding official scrutiny increasingly ineffective. The social attitudes that emerge from industrial capitalism emphasize productive labor, domestic respectability, and moral improvement in ways that leave little space for professions based on personal service and intimate entertainment. The middle-class values that dominate urban political discourse define social worth through contributions to economic productivity rather than cultural refinement or personal satisfaction, making your historical role as entertainer, companion, and cultural facilitator seem irrelevant to industrial society's priorities. The emphasis on scientific progress and social efficiency creates cultural frameworks that view your profession as primitive remnant of pre-industrial society rather than continuing response to universal human needs. Your clientele increasingly consists of men whose social positions require maintaining public respectability, while privately seeking experiences that industrial society's moral frameworks officially condemn, but cannot entirely eliminate. The professional discretion that once protected mutually beneficial relationships now serves to hide activities that society treats as shameful secrets rather than normal human behaviors. The psychological tensions created by this cultural contradiction affect both you and your clients, creating relationships based on guilt and secrecy rather than the mutual respect and cultural appreciation that characterized your profession during more accepting historical periods. The economic realities of operating within increasingly hostile legal and social environments force adaptation to underground markets that lack the regulatory protections and cultural acceptance that historically provided professional security. Your income becomes subject to extortion by corrupt officials, interference from criminal organizations, and competition from unregulated providers who undercut established practitioners through unsafe practices that threaten the industry's reputation. The financial independence that historically defined successful courtesans gives way to economic vulnerability that mirrors the broader exploitation affecting industrial workers throughout rapidly changing urban economies. Historians still argue whether industrial society's campaign against traditional intimate commerce represented genuine social progress or cultural impoverishment that eliminated ancient sources of human connection and artistic expression without providing adequate alternatives. The surviving records suggest both interpretations contain truth. Moral reform movements clearly address real exploitation and health hazards, but the elimination of regulated intimate commerce also removed cultural institutions that had historically provided women with economic independence and social influence unavailable through conventional channels. What's documented is that industrial transformation fundamentally altered human relationships in ways that continue affecting modern society's approach to intimacy, sexuality, and personal autonomy. The international scope of industrial transformation and moral reform creates coordinated efforts to eliminate traditional intimate commerce across different countries and cultures simultaneously, representing perhaps the first successful global campaign against practices that had persisted across diverse civilizations for thousands of years. Your profession faces opposition that transcends local cultural differences through shared commitment to industrial efficiency and Christian morality that characterizes 19th-century Western civilization. The steam ships and telegraph networks that facilitate international commerce also enable moral reform movements to coordinate strategies and share information across continental boundaries. The artistic and literary traditions that historically celebrated your profession's cultural contributions face censorship and moral condemnation that eliminate public discussion of topics that previous generations treated as normal aspects of human experience. The novels, poems, and artworks that once portrayed courtesans as complex individuals contributing to cultural development give way to cautionary tales and moral instruction that reduce your profession to symbols of social pathology requiring elimination. The cultural sophistication that historically distinguished educated courtesans from simple prostitution disappears beneath moralizing discourse that refuses to acknowledge distinctions between different forms of intimate commerce. The psychological impact of operating within increasingly hostile social environments affects practitioners of your profession in ways that previous generations rarely experienced. You face constant social condemnation, legal harassment, and economic uncertainty that creates stress levels incompatible with the emotional stability required for providing meaningful intimate companionship. The personal relationships that once formed the foundation of your profession become complicated by social pressures that make genuine human connection difficult to maintain within frameworks that treat intimate commerce as inherently exploitative rather than potentially fulfilling for all participants. As you extinguish the gas lamps in your parlor while listening to the distant whistle of night trains carrying industrial civilization toward a future that seems to have no place for the ancient art of intimate companionship, you recognize that your profession, which adapted to countless cultural changes throughout history, may finally be approaching its historical conclusion, not through moral evolution or social progress, but through the inexorable machinery of industrial efficiency that transforms human relationships into economic transactions while simultaneously condemning the very commercialization of intimacy that industrial society itself creates through its emphasis on monetary exchange as the basis for all social interaction. The centuries drift past like autumn leaves settling on forgotten pathways as you feel the weight of countless stories settling into peaceful memory. The ziggurat temples of ancient Babylon grow distant and dreamlike, their sacred purposes blending with the gentle rustle of silk kimonos and moonlit Kyoto gardens. The harsh realities of Roman streets soften into the philosophical discussions of Athenian symposiums, while the political intrigues of Versailles dissolve into the collaborative harmonies of Ottoman harems where women once wielded power through whispered wisdom. Your journey through these ancient roles reveals patterns as old as civilization itself, the eternal human need for connection, beauty, and understanding that transcends the particular forms it takes in different times and places. Whether serving gods in temple courtyards, debating philosophy in Renaissance salons, or navigating the complex hierarchies of imperial courts, you discovered that dignity and intelligence could flourish even within systems designed to limit women's choices and constrain their autonomy. The steam engines and moral crusades of the industrial age may have claimed victory over these ancient traditions, but they could not eliminate the fundamental human longings that sustained your profession across millennia and cultures. The desire for intellectual companionship, aesthetic appreciation, and intimate understanding continues flowing through human experience like underground rivers that surface in new forms when conditions permit their expression. Your stories remind us that human connection finds ways to flourish even within imperfect systems, and that wisdom, creativity, and resilience emerge from unexpected places throughout history's long unfolding. Rest now in the knowledge that these forgotten voices have been heard once more, their experiences honored, and their contributions to human culture acknowledged with the respect they always deserved. The world continues turning toward uncertain futures, but the ancient wisdom you embodied, the ability to create beauty, provide comfort, and maintain dignity under difficult circumstances, remains eternally relevant to anyone seeking to understand the full complexity of human experience across time's vast expanses. Sleep peacefully, knowing that even forgotten histories contribute to the ongoing story of human resilience, creativity, and hope.